the 30th of November. I'm your host, the most, Dana Durnford. You call in 709-589-4406. 709-589 is the magic number. Oodles and oodles of crazy nuclear. Nuclear's never going to run out of scumbags. They'll run out of uranium before they run out of actual scumbags. It's really something. I gotta do like a 10-hour show on just scumbags one of these days. Gotta get a psychiatrist to come on and explain how people can be so evil. I'd rather have Ted Bundy for a roommate than a nuclear scientist, you know? Think about that. Speaking of scumbags, gotta set a lot of rat traps in the IAEA. Get these big ones with the big claws. Start catching all of these scumbags. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's good, except for the scumbag nuclear industry, of course. IAEA admitted there is no such thing as a safe level. And you know what their standards are based on? It's based on natural, not man-made. That's reassuring, isn't it? Yeah, I don't see any bananas. It's all safe, all clear. Send the kids back in. Speaking of demons, there's the latest Rafael Grossi. Nice name, eh? Perfect for that particular job. The A-10 Warthog, one of many of these military stupid, only fires dirty bombs, depleted uranium munitions. McAllister, Oklahoma, has 4 dirty bomb factories. It's like the Abrams tank. The 155 millimeter, for instance, is pure DU. If you take one of them, get rid of the shell, throw the DU into your drinking water supply, they'll do documentaries about how evil you are for thousands of years. So the nuclear industry takes care of its waste. They got all nuclear plants have directly flowing into the ocean. They also have incinerators. Wrap your mind around that. And throw it in barrels. Just get it out of here. The legacy, and we've covered quite a lot over the years, of the ocean dumping, the frenzied open ocean dumping back during the Manhattan Project in particular, I like to highlight. It went on for 30 years, by the way. Especially Britain. What Britain done is the opposite of what a human would do. Why would you kill the ocean with anything? That's what the United Kingdom done on purpose to the Atlantic. Nuclear power is hoping to drive the climate crisis. Remember this story? Has the Confederation of British Industry got its head in the sand? And they're talking about the cement at Hinkley, which is enough to build a sidewalk to Rome, by the way. Nuclear power, apart from destroying biodiversity throughout its life cycle, produces 37 times more pollution than renewable energy sources do. 37 times more pollution through the production. And so even if they never had any brutal emissions of radioactivity from the fuel pools constant that are splitting the atoms, they're still in seriously pollution. Half the people in Japan were close to being evacuated. So that's a good case to put sirens in every community in the entire country if they get nuclear power, right? Because currently, you have about 70 to 100 sirens within 10 miles of a nuclear plant, a.k.a. disease factory. And so if you're close to evacuating half the people in Japan, which, by the way, they probably should have because the food was banned in half of Japan by 55 countries. Not Canada, of course, but 55 real countries. This should make you feel reassured and sleep real tight each night. They actually got 2 incinerators at Fukushima, unlike the normal nuclear power plant only has 1. Because they're allowed to burn radiation. They have limits. Nobody knows what the limit actually is, but they got limits. And remember the IAEA, there is no safe limits. And oh, by the way, we base our standards off potato chips and walking in the sunshine instead of man-made anthropogenic radiation. Kind of reminds me, everything is a memories lane when you come into nuclear, isn't it? Nuclear is the least friendly industry in the world, by the way. Should it be a crime to claim deadly, disgusting, despicable nuclear fallout is the same as flying on an airplane or a banana? And it absolutely should be a crime. If it was a crime, we'd have to build about 1,000 more jails. Think about it. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the aliens, they got a great big fancy additional in your left-hand corner incineration facility. They got one by Reactor 4 too, by the way. Oh, and they got an incineration pre-treatment facility. Hard cases. Hard cases. Whoops. Burning debris from Fukushima. This will warm up your heart. They're actually grinding up nuclear waste and taking it all over Japan and burning it. That can't turn out too good. In 1 year, there was an extra 865,000 cancers in stupid land. You know, Japan's pretty stupid. When half your country is banned from radioactive fallout and you don't rebuild, people who advocate nuclear is harmless, like flying on an airplane bananas, should go down there and clean it up for us. Last year on the 21st, the American media didn't report this, by the way, but on the 21st, U.S. lifted the Fukushima import restrictions from 14 prefectures. And that's the prefectures right there. I saved you the nightmare and put them all on the map. By the way, they're growing and harvesting food in a no-go zone alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Try making that up. I double dare you. A double dog dare you. Healthcare to death cure. I love it. IAEA admitted they're not even human today. That's what the headline should have been. Canada lifted restrictions after 93 days. So Japan couldn't ship it to 55 countries for a decade, but they could ship it to Canada, and they did. Canada was captured by the nuclear industries in the 70s. Boris Johnson, one of the last things he's done as dictator was with a handshake, he took away everybody's future in the United Kingdom and polluted the supermarkets and the corner stores. That's his actual words was, can't wait to fill up the corner stores and supermarkets with food from the Fukushima nuclear meltdown zone. Should make you feel comforting to know that they lifted restrictions on baby food and children's cereal 2 years ago in the United Kingdom, and finally removed all restrictions this year. That's why you got a prime minister and presidents to murder you in your supermarkets, because that's murder on a whole different scale. You can pretend it's not all you want. That's all you're actually doing. And you're hurting people, murdering them. United States FDA lifted the Japanese food import restrictions. September the 21st, Reuters, which remarkably we got nothing from Fox or CNN or ABC or BBC or CBC or anybody else, just from the Japanese media. They weren't long bragging. Rain with 20 million. And the worst of the worst particles of brutal iodine-131 per liter rainfall sustained fell on the U.S. This is France's model of the venting. It's based on 16 days when the model stops. 16 days. More equitable. Yeah, the isotopes got more rights than us, right? Good point, James. West Coast was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. There's 10 half-lives. Detected in the aquifers that supplies drinking water to large numbers of people. Really? How could it not be? Transported rapidly to Canada, the US. This is why you're not seeing fish jump in your lakes anymore, because it wiped out the insect population pretty well. Some species managed to survive. These were usually the feeder species, so you're probably seeing more mosquitoes because they don't have as many predators anymore. And so this sterilizes the vulnerable species like insects and that. And their thyroids and your thyroids and your friends and families and loved ones and future generations are saturated with anthropogenic man-made radiation, which means that's converted into radioactive hormones. And your pituitary gland stores those radioactive hormones on top of that, which is in your brain. So imagine how the children are actually being affected. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific what they've done. And this is how heartless the industry actually is. So they're growing food, a lot of no one will buy it. So they took the rice, turned it into sake. The Fukushima government itself has opened a sake shop in New York specializing in brews from the nuclear wasteland. Like, it's hard to appreciate how evil they actually are. This is from mainstream media complaining that people were stigmatizing the farmers. I mean, they're right alongside of thousands and thousands of one-ton bags of radiation in an area that's too radioactive to live in. You don't have media. You have whatever frig these things are. They call themselves media and journalists, but they're the furthest thing from what a journalist could be. A journalist is like a unicorn. There's not actually any out there. The situation at Ukraine nuclear plant is worrying as shelling and power cuts threaten the containment. I'm not worried about the containment. The reactors are shut down. As much as I'm worried about it, but not as much as I'm worried about the fuel pools with no containment. And if they do mention the fuel pool, it's like they burp or something, and then they move on to the next one. Ukraine's 4 operational nuclear power plants, which were shut down, were running. This is not the Zaporizhzhia plant, the occupied plant. And I apologize if I butchers the name of some Russian, Ukrainian. I don't speak the language and I don't care to. It's hard enough to do what I'm doing. I apologize for not being able to get it straight if I fuck it up. I'll have access to the national grid against following a complete loss of off-power site, because all nuclear plants run on external power. They need 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal for their entire existence to build them, to run them, in 60 to 100 years to decommission them. You have 2 plants dedicated to them. It was the first time that all the plants suffered a loss of external power at the same time. What's going on over... This is Gallows left, by the way. What's going on over in this area is unprecedented. Cruising for a genocide. And if you do have an event, then they're going to blame all the die-offs on Vladimir Putin, right? Not the nuclear industry. Not Fukushima, which is where it belongs. So loss of external power at the same time since the conflict began 9 months ago. Well, it's 9 months. You should be having a baby by now, shouldn't they? They relied on diesel generators. They can only do that for a short period of time if it was running just a few hours to complete. But 4 of them was, right? We don't know what happened because the nuclear industry has learned their lesson not to tell the slaves anything. To complete and simultaneous loss of offsite power for Ukraine's nuclear power plant shows the situation for nuclear safety and security in the country has become increasingly precarious, challenging, and potentially dangerous, said kooky, wacko, batshit lunatic Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the United Nations little pet monster known as International Atomic Energy Agency. Who the freak talks like that anyway? Has become increasingly precarious and challenging and potentially dangerous. That person's dangerous, whoever wrote that, which happened to be the government, the Director General of Tim Hortons. No, McDonald's. No. Another company. IAEA, Dana? Yeah. That's right. Said shit for brains, sack of shit, lying, twisted, sadistic little demon. Rafael Grossi. That sounds better. From the genocidal, omnicidal machine known as the United Nations. What? Nuclear power plants were not designed for war? I thought they had every contingency covered. That's what they tell us, right? They're the most arrogant creatures on the bloody planet is the scumbags that work for the nuclear industry. The situation further underlines the need for stepped-up action to protect the plants, prevent the danger of serious nuclear accident. Really? Like nuclear power plants running in a war zone with fighter jets and attack helicopters and tanks fired, shells everywhere is somehow a good idea? You're not asking for a radiological massive event at all by doing that? It said the Ukraine's nuclear power plant safety analyst unit. Nuclear power plants were not designed for war. It's because that's the nuclear industry that said something like that. It shouldn't shock you. But because the nuclear industry said something like that, it should shock the living fucking shit out of you. Excuse the French. The recent shelling at the site of the Ukrainian Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been one of the most intensive episodes in recent months, according to the degenerate, useless, by the way, IAEA, that has a team on site. What are they going to do? These are massive sites, by the way. They said they have no control over Japan's dumping into the ocean, period. A couple of weeks ago, right? Do you think they got any authority there? They got no authority. They're a corporation. They don't have any sovereignty anywhere. They're an illusion. They're put on a pedestal by the hypnotizing machine known as media that doesn't even exist. You know, like Rupert Murdoch owns 600 medias, outlets. So where's independence in something like that? Reuters has 1,800. AP has 1,800. Europe's largest nuclear power plant has lost power from the grid several times in recent months, several times a week. Whoever wrote that, I disrespect you for writing that. If we were teenagers, I'd stick a big lump of dog shit right in your... Never mind. Pie hole. 4 of the 6 reactor units are in cold shutdown, while the other 2 units have been returned to hot shutdown. Hot shutdown. Enabling them to provide steam to the plant and heat to the nearby city. So that's the preamble to running them. So if they get hit with a missile or one of those 155 millimeter depleted uranium rounds they're also using, that's going to detonate. These reactors are pressurized reactors, by the way. You're talking 1,000, 2,000 psi. So if you breach or crack the containment, once again, I'm worried about the fuel pools. And they got 40 years of fuel pools there sitting in the open, by the way. They got 20 diesel generators which start operating automatically when connection to the grid is lost. Fingers crossed. In this latest episode, 8 generators were needed over a day or so. And United Nations little tools reported the plant's 6 reactors are safe. Why would anybody believe the IAEA? Is there actually anybody stupid enough to believe that lot? That despicable legacy they have is just holy. How can we have a future with the IAEA on our planet? How does that actually work? And confirm the integrity of the spent fuel. Confirm the integrity. The fresh fuel and radioactive waste storage facilities, and there was widespread minor damage across the site. Both sides blame each other for the shelling, which is true. Told the IAE, that's the first true sentence in the whole story so far. Ukraine staff told degenerate little monsters and monkeys at the IAEA that the power lines were damaged at 2 locations about 50 to 60 kilometers away. So from 50 or 60 kilometers away, you can put a nuclear power plant in emergency mode by taking out its telephone power wires. Yay. Oh, excuse me. I apologize for not turning my mic off. It's a joke. Too much work to turn the mic down. I gotta turn a button, for Christ's sakes. Russia accuses Ukraine of cutting power to the power plant intentionally. Ukraine says they're adamant Russia's shelling the plant, that they're the provocateurs, the agent provocateurs. Oh, yeah, Matthew Bunn, Harvard Kennedy School. Like, whenever you hear something like that, you know they're degenerate scumbags, right? The people operating the plants are heroes. Why are you operating a plant in a war zone? Shit for brains. We all owe them a debt of gratitude. Why? What are you talking about? Why do we owe them a debt of gratitude? For running what about the coal plants and oil plants and gas plants? Are they heroes too? No, just the nuclear, Dana. What are you talking about? They're concerned about the possibility of the diesel generators failing or running out of fuel and lead to reductions in cooling of the reactors, raising the core temperatures and evaporating the water, which is happening anyway, from the primary circuit and the melting of the nuclear fuel. Bombing could destroy safety systems and buildings. Jesus, I never thought about that. That's scary. I never even considered that. Wow, you must be smart. M-A-R-T, smart. That could lead to radiation accidents. Accidents! You got a lot of nerve, buddy. Matthew Scumbag, the professor of the practice of energy. A professor. There goes my fate. I don't know about yours. National security and foreign policy, which is just the worst of the worst combination you can imagine. National security. At the Harvard Degenerate School, agrees that the nuclear reactors in a war zone pose a potentially deadly dangers. Did they write this for like 3-year-olds or something, or is that just who they are? Operating a reactor on backup diesel generator, something that should be done rarely and briefly. Yeah, like just a few hours. In Ukraine, they are being forced to do it again and again. It's around 25, 27 times. And that's several, like they said earlier, and it's stupid. If you ever go to the media and you're trying to find facts, they're there somewhere. But you got to suffer before you can get to it. What I mean by that is they're going to just hit you with so much propaganda you'll never know what a fact is again. You'll be like, honey, you sure that's shoes? That could be terrorists. I improvised devices to blow my feet off so they can get back at America. If they fail within hours, the water boils off. The reactor cores are exposed. It creates hydrogen. The hydrogen has oxygen as a catalyst or spark, and it's a real big bang. Eh? And the fuel in the core will begin to melt. Catastrophic radiation releases is likely. If you lose the water, you're going to have an explosion from the hydrogen because it melts down. It doesn't need... You can have a meltdown underwater because it doesn't need oxygen. Oxygen is the enemy, actually, right? And this is true even if a reactor is not operating. When the reactor shuts down, the same for the fuel pools, stops releasing energy from splitting the atoms. No, they put control rods in there to stop the chain reaction, still splitting the atoms. And the intensity radioactive material in the core continues to generate a lot of heat. The heat is the splitting of the atoms. That's how it produces heat. Claiming that it's radioactive decay, which is decay into another atom. Splitting the atoms. That goes on for millions of years. This is why the consensus of the stupidest people on the planet is put it in a deep hole in the ground and pretend that it's not going to melt down on its own in the near future. The spent fuel pools also pose a danger. Really? Gee, I never thought about that. That's amazing. You're so smart. M-A-R-T, smart. The spent fuel pools have decades of reactor cores because they don't have a repository anywhere. There's no containment for... It's hard not to attack those people. It's really hard. Right? There's no urgency in the urgency. They're not people. They don't have any of the attributes of what a human is supposed to have, do they? In particular, when a reactor begins to melt, in particular, when a nuclear power plant's reactor cores begin to melt, steam pressure builds up in the containment as hydrogen. If the pressure gets too high, the containment can shatter because it's already under 1,000, 2,000 psi. releasing a large amount of radioactivity into the environment is because it's a... Hang on. I got a better way of explaining that than just getting angry and yelling and sticking my finger in my eye, which works usually for me. I don't know about you, but... Well, it was reactor 3. This was a 190-foot building. That's the fuel pool. But there's people out there actually claiming they got videos of the fuel pool, and that's the industry, right? They're not trying to be honest or something. They're just recycling, regurgitating the same old lie that they've debunked for over a decade now. Not worth the hassle, right? Like the banana. Yeah. We beat people up for a whole year over the banana fable. Wait for it. Fukushima reactor 3. I got it. So that's reactor 3 blown up. These stacks, the buildings that don't exist there were 190 foot. There might be one there if I get out of the way though. Get you, yeah, so you can see that one there, right? That's reactor 2. The stacks, you can't even get close to the stacks, by the way. They're around 25 sieverts. So the buildings are 19-story buildings. How big is the explosion? Well, we can watch the explosion. Maybe. Let's do that. This will zoom in, hopefully, in a second. There's people out there claiming the fuel pool's actually in the building, and they don't zoom in on the building and then the fuel pool. They just pretending they're at a fuel pool, which was the mock-up for journalists to tell you see, there's the fuel pool coming back down to Earth. Look. What are you going to do? Some people's kids, man. You can't take them anywhere. Oh, yeah. Oh, to be born on stupid mountain. So reactors have vents that allow some of the steam to be released. Again, it's not steam that causes the meltdown. Or when you lose power, right, there is steam, but that's vented down into the tores, right? It's called burping. But the hydrogen that is produced from the meltdown of the zirconium cladding of the fuel rods, because when they're exposed to air from the loss of the water, they catch fire, right? And that's what causes the hydrogen. Then the hydrogen, because it's burning so hot, the zirconium claddings, then the pellets now are incinerating at the same time. And now it's ran away, right? Fukushima was invented because the tsunami took out 680 kilometers of the coastline, up to 10 to 20 kilometers inland in some places. There was no power. The whole site, the tsunami ran through the site. So that was the end of it. It took out all the infrastructure directly at the site. Ukraine has installed filters, folks, that would filter out most of the radiation before it was released in an emergency. Does anybody actually believe that stuff? These are, because there's so much release, the filter can't possibly work, and it'll only make it worse. So there's no filter there, because they're not that stupid. Yeah, they're stupid, but it's just, there's enough to go around, that's for sure. Operators been brutalized. They are soldiers with guns. Many have left. There's only around a quarter of them left. So if they were being brutalized, then they also would have been held prisoner, right? They wouldn't have left. And roughly a quarter of as many staff as it once had. So 3/4 of the staff had left. The operators have been brutalized. No. Russia's not going to brutalize the people who know the site. 3/4 of them left. In some case, a core meltdown releases radiation into the containment, but the containment holds and very little makes it into the environment. No. Right, this is the fable they told about 3 Mile Island, by the way. Arnie Gunnarsson and Lake Barrett hired people to go in there for 3 minutes. That's a meltdown. That's not vents. They're claiming this is what happened at 3 Mile Island in 1979. But if the containment fails, it's happened at Fukushima, which is amazing that they even acknowledged that, despite the fact they're going to claim Chernobyl is worse than Fukushima, like that shit for brains Edwin Lyman last night, the disgusting cowards at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Disgusting. It's disgusting what they done. It's despicable to put out a video with that many lies in it. A runaway reaction is physically impossible in the reactors and operating in Ukraine today. No, if you lose power, then you have the steam. The steam drops the level of the water. The fuel rods they're coated with zirconium. They're going to burn immediately and create the hydrogen. This exact thing can happen. And this was, of course, this is from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. If they're from a university, the schools of mass destruction, there's zero possibility they're going to be honest with you. And 99% of the possibility they're going to just fabricate stuff. We cover it constantly. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely the norm for them to lie to you about every facet of this story. Should it be a crime to claim deadly nuclear fallout is the same as flying on an airplane or a banana or sleeping next to somebody or getting on an airplane? Let's listen to a few of them. Let's look at a few of them out of curiosity. I haven't got enough work on my table already. Nuclear industry is really something, man. Where's Robert Gale, too? He's always good for a laugh. Here's Robert. Robert does transplants, arms and legs and stuff like that. Surely we can trust him, Dana. I don't know, let's see. He said the radiation at the nuclear meltdown for the workers of multiple nuclear reactors 4 melted down. Number 4 melted down too. They won't even admit it, despite the fact it's completely gone. Let me show you a picture, because let me split that in two. Robert Gale. He's got an education that makes me look like an invalid. But he cut your throat and your mom's throat and your kid's throat and take their money out of their pocket and the sucker out of their...
No, really, I'm sorry, go back.
Jesus. I know that was pretty loud. Equal to peanut butter, eating peanut butter, 20 days in New York, driving 600 kilometers in a car, flying on an airplane, kayaking for 15 minutes, and receiving a microsiever of radiation. It's comparable risk for the workers at the nuclear meltdown in Japan. He went there, and that's what he told them, right? They were... He treats people with radiation in the hospital. In other words, he's a murder machine. Like saying that going to a meltdown is like kayaking for 15 minutes is a whole different level of evil. is like smoking 14 cigarettes, not a day, but in your entire life. That's a whole different level of evil. Talking about peanut butter in comparison to a nuclear meltdown site, that's a different level. He should be in jail. Who else we got there? There's so many of them is the problem, right? Oh yeah, what about the Canadian demonic little demon? He's a sadistic Chris Saracosis, or whatever the hell it is, from Simon Fraser University.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to...
Now, how did everybody know to laugh that time? He says, like flying on an airplane, standing in front of granite, living next to a coal-fired power station, natural radiation in the human body. But how did everybody know to laugh at that? Because that was a deceitful lie, see?
With myself as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million.
A year, folks. So there's a big incentive for him to lie about... That was a presentation on Fukushima, the Fukushima disaster crisis. This was exactly 1 month after the meltdowns. As I showed you at the beginning, Canada had 220 million atoms per liter of 129 and 20 million atoms per liter of 131, which is just a fraction of the ratios of different isotopes that were actually in it. So, like, lying is, that's what the industry's, its entire legacy is based upon deceit and deception and dishonesty. Pretty amazing. Well, like, it's such a coward. The people in the industries and that are pro-nuclear and that are telling the lies, you can tell they're weasels the minute you listen to them. Like, all the media done this trick here where they're pretending that they're on top of a building to your left that actually doesn't even exist.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Now, how many people out there think she's in an invisible building 100 feet above the wreckage of Reactor 4 to the left? Call 1-800-psychiatrist right now for your first consultation. Conceivably, about 10% or more of the radiation in the reactor core of several reactors could be released. Again, voiding the fact that the fuel pool has no containment. They're full of decades of reactor cores. The area of land contaminated and requiring evacuation would depend on the wind, the weather, and could amount to hundreds or even thousands of square kilometers. But not to worry, because it can't melt down, see? Which, of course, it can. No nuclear power plants are immune to this, despite what they're trying to convince you in this story. The economic, social, and health effects, including especially the mental health effects, which is a despicable, it's a revolting thing to say. Do you got 70 to 100 sirens around a typical nuclear power plant in the United States? Not so that people can avoid the mental health, because that thing goes off all the time. So they can get out of Dodge if there's a radiological event, aka nuclear meltdown, or the terrorists, aka nuclear scientists, screw up. The only nuclear terrorists, the only dirty bombs out there is created in McAllister's bomb manufacturer for the A-10 Warthog and the Abrams tanks. They're not the only spots creating them, by the way, unfortunately. The MIT despicable professor of nuclear science and engineering, so who knows better, warns against panic-inducing language. Like, interviewing somebody like that is equal to interviewing Satan, right? These are demonic demons. You don't get a job at MIT or Harvard or anywhere else in the nuclear industry unless you're an absolute demonic demon that can disguise themselves as a human. The rhetoric about nuclear disasters and catastrophes, as well as the references to Chernobyl, are inaccurate and misleading, says the despicable MIT degenerate clowning as a professor at the School of Mass Destruction, known as MIT. A runaway reaction at Chernobyl is physically impossible in the reactors in operation in Ukraine today. Is that why they shut them all down at Zaporizhzhia, because they can't melt down? See, nobody's ever said they can't melt down until you open your mouth. A disgusting subhuman creature in the nuclear industry. It's amazing. Your parents should be arrested for not drowning you when you were born. The diesel generators and batteries, which are not going to operate jack shit, sit behind thick reinforced cement walls that cannot be penetrated by rifles. But everything else is going to go through these walls or over them. You don't need to go through the walls. You got to take out the electrical system. He says if a radiological release to occur, he'd get down there and stick it all in a bottle. It would be moderate in scope locally and regionally. The most radioactivity would be retained within the containment structure of the plant. So why even write the article if you're not even going to put a little tiny bit of fact in there and you're just going to interview creepy, despicable scum like him? Health effects would be low and almost certainly undetectable. Among people further away, exposure would be negligible. It's just a single atom in your body. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells till it finally builds a tumor around it 20, 30, 40 years down the road. If you were in North America during the fallout, you're talking about 220 million atoms of 129 per liter and 20 million atoms of 131. So you can extrapolate all the uranium, plutonium, americium, curium, and everything else. The xenon and krypton. Don't worry, Dana, Superman will fly around and stop it all from getting there. Which makes more sense than the nuclear industry, actually. A form of self-destruction. Japan weighs up plans to expand nuclear power. Japan's prime minister, whose ratings have crashed, is pushing for as many as 17 disease factories to be switched back on, more than a decade on from the meltdowns. With an S, scumbags, next time, please. Japan's plan to invest in nuclear power is a form of self-destruction. Yeah, it is. The triplet was 4 meltdowns and 8 fuel pools. And the common spent fuel pool is probably gone too. It's a smaller building, right? So it was more vulnerable, and tsunami ran through the entire site. Ooh, you can't prove that, Dana. I know. I hear you, man. Go back and grovel at your god in the nuclear industry. So you see the circles on the bottom? That's the water running through the site. So when the water receded, Dana, they went down there and vented it. What are you talking about, moron? there's no infrastructure left. There's no power to vent something. Such a weasel industry, right? Everybody in the industry should be stuck out on an island with no food and no water. And just forget about them. That's the smartest thing to do if you really want to have a future. To meet its net zero target. Man, they pushed that since Constipated Party, Conference of Parties 26 in Scotland last year. Shame on Scotland for hosting these monsters, by the way. Has triggered warnings of potential blackouts in Tokyo. We never know blackouts last year, the year before, this year, the year before, year before, year before, year before, year before, year before. Why is next year going to be different? Previous governments in Japan are not going to build any new or replace the aging ones, fearing a backlash from a shaken and skeptic public. And as soon as they stop looking, then the scumbags will get back into business right away. And they know people will just move on, right? They'll just poison them all so they're incapable of thinking rationally anymore. If Kishida gets his way, 7 additional reactors will be started after next summer, including the number 2 in Okinawa, which sustained serious structural damage. It was the closest plant to the quake's epicenter, allegedly. You got to go check it out, make sure before you can actually regurgitate that. Many residents argue the contingency plan for potential accidents will put lives at risk. The evacuation plans can't work. You can't evacuate the locals. A lot of these places got a little small, windy road traveling through the mountains. So anybody gets a flat tire, it's over. Who last year launched a legal action to block the restart was that guy right there. I like him a lot. It gets better. In the event of a serious accident, 1,000 residents within 5 kilometers would leave immediately. 190,000 people within 30 kilometers would evacuate in stages. Do you know how fast radiation can travel 30 kilometers? There'll be huge traffic jams and we won't be able to escape. It could take 5 days for everyone to make it to safety. No food, no water, no toilets. If it's winter, no heat. The plant operator, Tohoku Electric Power, and local scumbag lapdogs would provide 1,000 useful idiots to screen people for radiation exposure. And they're going to use a Geiger, a gamma counter, and they're going to check for alphas, neutrons, and betas, X-rays, and that their devices are probably going to be from the despicable Safecast, revolting, disgusting Safecast, the hideous Safecast, monstrous Asby Brown and the rest of them, disgusting, horrific Safecasts. Who've now gone global, right? What they done is just 100% genocide. 1,000 staff, not nuclear scientists, not nuclear students, not nuclear academics, not universities, but 1,000 staff. Not medical experts with radiation, but 1,000 staff. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. Just like the nuclear industry. That is frightening. They can't guarantee an evacuation if there's something like a major earthquake. Instead of planning for an evacuation and running away and leaving your home, your communities, your pets behind forever, your graveyards, wouldn't it be better to live safely in a place where there's no need to ever think about fleeing your homes permanently? And his response to the energy and security climate crisis won the backing of Fate Byroll, right, the head of the International Energy Agency, which is also UN. and who worked for the nuclear industry for decades, who said restarting more plants, one of the world's biggest consumers of gas, would free up liquid natural gas and help ease Europe's energy supply fears during the winter. Europe's energy supply is because you put an embargo against the only country where they can get their commodities from in volume. It was instant inflation. It was on purpose. Because a handful of people that runs the EU are not elected. They're not appointed. They're appointed, rather. They're not elected. So, I mean, the EU just called nuclear clean energy, for goodness sakes. And their idiotic taxonomy. Domestic opposition to a bigger role for nuclear energy mix appear to be weakening. Weakening! Did it actually exist at any point? If it was just shocking there's not at least 100 people doing what I'm doing. It's horrifying. Newspapers found 50% of the residents were strongly or somewhat opposed to a restart. Most often thinks it's like a banana and a potato chip and flying on an airplane, which is why we got a poll, by the way, because should it be a crime to claim the deadly nuclear fallout is the same as flying on an airplane or eating a banana or walking in sunshine or 15 minutes in a kayak or eating peanut butter or sleeping next to your loved ones? And they've been saying the same lies for 80 years, except for the peanut butter one in the kayak. That's a new one on me. All of the Japanese nuclear plants are on the coast, and this country has earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and everything else constantly. They even got a new 100-foot seawall to protect it from tsunamis. A 100-foot seawall. Like, if the water comes up 50, 60 feet, it's going to crack that off. There's zero possibility that wall is going to hold up. At best, 30, 35 feet. After that, the laws of physics says it'll crack off. Because if you fill up the coastline with the water, because you got when a tsunami happens, you have multiple ones coming in on top of each other at 700 kilometers an hour. The wall is going to give up the ghost at some point, right? Because there's so much weight behind it. So, 1 becquerel is atomic disintegration per second. 1 curie is 37 billion becquerels. And there's up to 140 curies per gram. So 1 gram can contaminate a square mile severely. So Japan reactors had 5 to 10 million pounds in each of them and lost everything. All the fuel pools, there's 2 in each building are lost with decades of reactor cores. So bioaccumulation, biomagnification, bioconcentration moves up the food chain, right? And so by the time it gets up to fish and animals and you're eating it, then you're going to bioaccumulate it. So if you eat 10 becquerels a day, or even 1 becquerel a day, you're going to be ingesting an absurd amount and bioaccumulating an absurd amount of radiation like all the other species. Australia, the pro-nuclear community in Australia is like, these guys are savages, aren't they? Let me try to adjust my color a little bit. I got control over the camera, so don't quite look like a lobster. Not all the way, still kind of look like a lobster. Oh, let me go back to that one. So every day the Australian delays just costs us more, and it's also just another day we are beholden We are beholden to the vagaries of the weather and climate policies. Sky News host Chris Kenny. It's obviously the way to go if you want emission-free power. So they put these useful idiots on TV, and in increments over decades, they, like the Homer Simpson and the Hulk and Spider-Man, they you know, I like the Hulk, I like the Spider-Man, I like the Simpsons, right? I've heard that all my life. And that's the point, that's the idea. But what it does subconsciously is it disarms you. It disenfranchises you from the important stuff. What have I got there, Dana? And so my video got 1 second longer last night. I'm missing something. Hang on. Who knows? Oh, to be like, if you sent all the lawyers to Fukushima nuclear plant, like pro-nuclear and nuclear academics and MIT professors and that, they would claw your eyes out. There's zero possibility you get them near the place. They kill you. They pick up a rock and crush your head, and there's zero possibility you're going to get them on the site. To work at Fukushima is equivalent to be given the order to die, say radiation experts. $190 taxi ride for workers to get home from the free medical clinic. Work at Fukushima to go on for 10,000 years. There's simply no power to clean nuclear energy claims. Despite the bold claims of the likes of the nationals, the scientific evidence shows nuclear energy is nowhere near as clean as renewable options like wind and solar. But the best one is geothermal. And you just got a little bit of engineering you got to solve. Like, how do you get deep enough to tap into the geothermal? That's it. Technology's been around for 60, 70 years. Some places is easy accessible. But how do you make it accessible to everybody? Well, you get some universities come up with a solution, Dana. But they're too busy promoting small modular reactors that don't exist. And fusion, which doesn't exist. They'll work 1,000 years to get the kinks out, but they won't spend 2 minutes to make geothermal applicable worldwide. Ah, yes, the inconvenient truth about green activists' crusade against nuclear. Crusade against nuclear. Green activists. So, like, if you criticize nuclear, you're an activist. And you're green, right? It's just not, you're just a human. They're labeling you climate activists, which is what they are, who have successfully vilified nuclear energy, leading to plant closures around the developed world. May be surprised to learn their efforts were actually increasing greenhouse gas emissions. According to a report from the Despicable Breakthrough Institute, which is Matthew Wald, who put out an article today. We got here somewhere coming up later. Environmental Research Center. No, they're the military-industrial complexes. The boring truth about nuclear waste, Matthew Wald, who MIT, by the way, after Fukushima meltdown, instead of bringing out a nuclear scientist to explain it, they brought Matthew Wald online live stream to the audience, the pro-nuclear audience, It was quite the spectacle because it was like 240 quality. Matthew kept breaking up and everything like this. Rather than bringing out a nuclear scientist or a nuclear academic who MIT's university is full of. No, they rolled out Matthew Wald or Stanford or whoever the frig it was. According to the report from the Despicable Breakthrough Institute, a non-environmental research center. You're going to like this. So they're saying because you got rid of nuclear, you created an additional 800 million tons of CO2, which plants can't live without, and animals can't live without, and humans can't live without. And if there's no CO2, there's no species left on the planet. To place the number into context, it's enough CO2 emission to melt 2,400 kilometers of Arctic sea ice. What are they talking about? So it equates to 2 full years. Wait till you get a load of what they're talking about. So it's more than 0.1 parts per million of the 416 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the planet's atmosphere. So by getting rid of the despicable nuclear, you put an extra 0.1 parts per million, and that's enough to melt 2,400 square kilometers of Arctic summer ice. This is the Breakthrough Institute. This is some serious, twisted, and sadistic math. It's 100%... They can't repeat the experiment, let's put it that way. These are degenerates. The minute you hear anything to do with Matthew Wald, really, right? If you go listen to Matthew Wald, you'll realize that's an idiot. Cotton University in India or Pakistan, I can't remember. Cotton University will have a prestigious event. Prestigious. And expected to offer an opportunity to young victims to interact with the world-famous scientists that are nuclear. The prestigious monsters. World-famous scumbags. Necessary evil. France refires coal plant. Well, the coal, gas, and oil emissions only travel 50 or 100 kilometers. And the planet is natural to the planet. It's created by the planet in the first place. It just recycles back into the environment. If you just take your coal plants out of your city, because, Nikola Tesla gave us the ability to transmit electricity enormous distances with transformers, right? It's really simple to do. Anybody with rudimentary knowledge would know that's how it works, right? But when you put you put any facility in a populated community with emissions, you're going to have emissions landing close by. So this is Sellafield, and it's surrounded by farms like all nuclear power plants worldwide. And it's hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools for, say, 80 years. Ontario electricity subsidies fail to reduce root cause of high prices. I gotta admit, the new computer is a lot easier for me to do the prep work. Today was like a charm. I was like, this is actually fun. I should have done this a little while ago, maybe. Ontario electricity subsidies fail to reduce root cause of high prices. So what they done was they let the rate, or the companies, because of the embargoes against Russia, they got so much inflation. So electric companies are making a lot of money, so they put a cap on them, and the extra money they give to the taxpayers that are already paying 4 times regular prices. But you're not addressing the root cause. Leeds City Council urged to stock up on radiation monitors because in case they have a war, right? They don't have any. So give the nuclear industry some loving and spend money you don't have and buy some radiation detectors in case Vladimir Putin hits you with a nuclear weapon. Kind of lose faith in humanity when you see stuff like that. Well, that's applicable to everything in nuclear, I guess. Well, India must step up its global campaign and nail Pakistan-sponsored terror. Like India doesn't have agent provocateurs and constant terrorism going on. Come on, man. Come on, man. At a Call of Duty, you can go around and pick up radioactive material and earn points. It comes with a spiffy Geiger counter that shows danger at 9.8 unisieverts, which means it's atoms, right? But I'm sure in reality it would be atoms, but they're going to claim that it's just gamma shines and X-rays and neutrons or whatever. Well, because it's a Geiger counter, then it's just gamma, basically. Requires players to search for nuclear material with the help of a Geiger counters. So the word Geiger counter now will be diluted on the internet forever. Right? This is probably the last real Geiger counter you're going to see for a while once that shows up. Cleaners on Sellafield site engaging in strike ballots. Cleaners. Yeah. Sellafield cleaners do a difficult, sometimes dirty job keeping the huge nuclear disaster running smoothly. But they're planning on going on strike because they're not part of the regular, right? They're contracted. And cost of living has gone through the roof. And Britain had a lot, Boris Johnson had a lot to do with the inflation worldwide, causing the embargoes originally. We recently announced $10 million winter support package designed to help the lowest paid colleagues. Now they're calling them colleagues. With the rising cost of living. Why not use geothermal, though? Why wouldn't you use geothermal? The only issue they got is engineering problem. Because if you got to go deep, there's a problem with heat on the cutting tool, and the rocks are a lot harder. And so there's a company that's just going to use lasers, basically, to cut down into the earth. It's a little more complicated than that. We'll use basically just atomized rocks until you get deep enough to tap into geothermal. And then you can replace gas oil and coal plants. Oh, looks like I got to go slurp with the disgusting Robitussin. It's a good thing I brought you in, baby. Bring me back from the dead. Woohoo! That's nasty. Scandal hit Japanese cabinet minister refuses to step down. He's the reconstruction minister from Fukushima. So they got rid of let me see. They replaced the Justice and the Internal Affairs ministers after scandals, so why not get rid of him? He's got so many scandals, they're demanding he steps down, and he's like, no. Oh, that's where it was to. Right there. Right there. 25 minutes after, it was 21 seconds. Up top left-hand corner of video. And 12 hours later, it gained a second. They're getting better at hiding what they're doing. I wonder, that's the first time I've seen that, I think. Because usually I make my videos 6 seconds longer 12 hours later. That's why it says 12 hours. Because you take 12 hours later, my videos typically are longer. Sometimes they're significantly longer. Demand for Jeju seafood in Japan expected to plunge after Japan's Fukushima water discharge. The tanks are empty. I got a playlist full of them. Of the tanks and all the documentation. The tanks were built to trick you and manipulate you. And so you wouldn't blame Japan for the death of the Pacific Ocean as it happened in increments over time, right? And the fable of emptying the tanks, Japan says they got, what is it, $600 million US put aside to buy the fish and freeze it until people stop paying attention, and then they'll just auction it off or sell it. No, it's just the whole bloody industry, entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty and deception. And we cover it all the time. It's the norm. It's normal. Nothing personal. We're just evil. That's all. That's how they see it. That's pretty concerning. Because there was 1,000 tanks in 2013. And 1,000 tanks in 2019, 1,000 tanks 2021, 1,000 tanks in 2022. What's going on? They're saying the cement is melted off the pedestals for the damaged reactors in Fukushima. This is a recent story and a recent picture. This just came out today. Now, we've seen this before, right? Now they're claiming they're inside and that the pedestal has lost off all the cement, and the only thing holding up is the scrap. Where's the numbers? Bring me the numbers. They have multiple strong earthquakes, not just 2020, 2021. And Yuchi Bori should be arrested for crimes against humanity. We will check up on TEPCO. TEPCO's not a decommissioning authority. They weigh 440 tons. 440 tons is being held up by a couple of scraps of rebar. I got no idea how to get the calculator. Oh, hang on, maybe I do. Ooh. And so now, all the colors, I got to figure out how to change all the colors because everything's different. So 440 in Japan is metric, right? So times 22. Oh. Ooh. Is so £1 million, Dana. So you got £1 million held up on some rebar. That's the fable, right? First off, the reactors melted down and lost their inventories is not holding up £1 million. It's extremely unlikely that that is real. Let me go back to the beginning of the madness here. That was today, the last day of November. Woohoo, we got 20 shows in for November. 5 shows a week, baby. It's a grueling pace. The number 1 reactor building. You're number 1. Oh, you're number 1. You're number 1. Ooh. Ooh, you number one. Let me see. First off, I'll just keep you entertained while I get the rest of it. Dust remains of reactor 2. Fuel pulls. Sorry. That's twice I got myself tonight, which means twice I got you folks tonight. Now I gotta check the. I think that's a video. Make sure the volume is. That's the stump of a 190-foot building. People out there saying, "Look, there's the fuel pole, Dana." Same with this one here. Look, Dana, there's the fuel pole. Well, the fuel pole's at the top of the building, not the bottom of the building, moron. It's pathetic, really, when people do that. But they're not talking to me. They're trying to convince people who don't know any better, right? They're victimizers. These are criminals. And the nuclear industry is just... They're professional scum, right? Professional degenerate monsters. Oh, reactor 1. Let's see how bad reactor 1 is first. Yeah, number 1 melted down in about 50 minutes. And it detonated. Bear with me. I just really, really, really hate lawyers. Zero tolerance. Just bear with me. We're almost to it. There we go. What else have I got going on here? We'll start right here. That's enough. So, it's impossible to bolt and melt the bulk of the melted fuel is in Unit 1 containment because of the explosion that they had. I need a picture. There we go. Wee doggy. Come back to it in a second. Video believed to show parts of the internal structure in Reactor 1 containment vessel scattered around. The 3-inch thick lead plate had disappeared. Oh yeah, the detonation of that was really spectacular. Three times that got away from me tonight. I'm getting old, man. I'm getting old. You know, you're having a bad day when that gets past you 3 different times. Reminds me of that joke. This guy goes up to Ontario, Canada, Ontario, and his buddy got a couple of 100-acre farm where he grows corn. Corn's pretty tall. So he said, the best view is you climb up on the barn. He said, I got to run to town, have a look around. I'll be back in a half an hour with the beer and everything else. And so the guy climbs up on top of the barn and he's looking around and it's just corn as far as you can see, but this shadow goes over his head. And he looks up and he sees this black man and he's flying. And he can't believe what's going on and goes down. He lands in one of the fields and jumps off the roof and he goes down. He runs up and he says to the black guy, he said, what the hell is that? And he said, it's a hang glider. And he said, gee, you should come down to the East Coast. He said, we got all kinds of wind and everything down there. You can fly around for days. You can stay at my place for free. So a couple of months later, he's back on the East Coast, and the black man comes down and sets up his hang glider. And he gets up on the cliff right on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. He said, I'll be back in about a couple of hours. And he said, okay, have a great day. And don't go in the water. A lot of sharks out there. And he said, no worries. So he jumps off the cliff and he's gliding along. And meanwhile, Georgie and Harry are headed out to jig a few fish, drink a few beer, shoot a few birds. in a little double-ender dory with a little 3 Acadian putt. And that's how the engine works, where it just like kind of stalls and then putt. And pushes along with 2 or 3 knots all day. And so anyway, the shadow goes over their head, and George says, Harry, what the hell is it? What the hell is it? And Harry grabs the 12 gauge and I don't know what the fuck it is, but it sure let go of that nuclear scientist some quick. Up to 1 million sieverts per hour outside of Fukushima Unit 1 containment vessel. Still too hot to attempt measuring other areas. I forgot to mention, but he was a nuclear scientist. My apologies. Still too hot to attempt measuring other areas. 1 million sieverts per hour is a lethal dose from, like a mile away or something. Japan confirms full meltdown at all 3 reactors. And like they never admitted that again for 3 years or something. They covered it up. What's the date on that? June 6, 2011. So you had 1 million sieverts outside of reactor 1. You had confirmation it melted down within 50 minutes. We know it detonated. And that the documentation coming out said there's no melted fuel, no bulk of melted fuel in Unit 1 because of the explosion. The cement foundation of reactor cores melted down at the Fukushima No. 1 plant had deteriorated so much that reinforcing the bars are now exposed. So the minute that you got Uchibori, which is now the governor of Fukushima Prefecture, just re-elected again, then that you have to be suspect, right? Crippled plant. Strong quake strikes off the coast of the prefecture 2021 and 2022. We covered both of them in March, right? Just within days of the anniversary. And there were upper 6s on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of 7. Uchibori told a prefectural assembly, "We will check up on TEPCO's efforts." And Uchibori, the first 3 days after the meltdown, he had done 70 interviews or something like that. Like, first off, you can't get close to this stack. It's around 25 sieverts. So claiming that the containment and that the fuel is melted to the bottom of the containment, right, we've heard these types of lies many times over the year. These are unequivocal lies. You can't get close. These are the vent stacks, by the way, they use for the fuel pools in the incinerator. Well, the other one, which is closer to Unit 4, which is where the incinerator is close by, is the one I'm talking about for that, actually. These are for the fuel pools. That's all they do is vent radiation really high so it falls off site. And the sites are usually surrounded by farms. So the magnitude 7.4 quake, March the 16th last year, struck in the same offshore area, measured a lower 6 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of 7 around a nuclear plant. So you got to take 10, which is the international scale, divide it into 7 to get 1.4285, 1.429, 1.43, and multiply that by the lower seismic intensity, Japanese seismic intensity scale of lower 6, which says 6.4, is a 9.2. No, I'm sorry, 9.1. That's a big earthquake, see? And it was $5 billion worth of damage. It was 900 schools damage, but it had to go past the nuclear power plant's fragile remains to get to all the schools and infrastructure. It was over $5 billion insurance paid out, $5 billion. But the fragile reactors like reactor 3 and reactor 1 were fine. The industry is actually insane. Matthew Wald. The boring truth. Think about that statement, right? The boring truth. In other words, this is not interesting at all. And think about nuclear waste, you might have something in mind like the creeping blobs of green goo on The Simpsons. So boring, and it invoked The Simpsons. In reality, it is a lot cleaner and easier to manage than that. Yeah, like dump it in holes in the ground where the water tables will be destroyed forever in aquifers, or the Bikini Islands where you just put it under cement and ran away and set us up to the people who don't even have nuclear academics. They got all nuclear power plants hemorrhaged it into the ocean legally. They dumped it in the ocean for 3 decades straight worldwide. And they got 30 million one-ton bags of nuclear waste minimum in Japan that they're slicing open in a no-go zone 2 miles from the ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns and growing food in it for sale. Try making that up on your own. To meet our decarbonization goals, says Matthew, will require ramping up disease factories known as nuclear power plants. We'll need to correct our misperceptions of nuclear waste. We'll need to correct our wait for it. The most common one, he says, cobalt-60. The most common one is curium isotopes. Thanks to the great genocide machine. Let me see if I can find it for you. Ooh. Yeah, nuclear's harmless, ain't it? It does Loveless Respiratory Institute, Gilmedi. Curium isotopes are major byproducts in irradiated nuclear fuels and comprise a significant fraction of the alpha-emitting nuclides. So a biokinetic model of inhaled curium compounds in dogs. Oh, this will get interesting now. Spent fuel pool. Where's the plutonium? Like a coffee mug is still solid, is what he's saying if the fuel breaks. Materials with a long half-life, like plutonium, are barely radioactive. So you're saying plutonium is barely radioactive. Toxicity of inhaled plutonium dioxide in beagle dogs is 144 beagle dogs and puppies. Inhaled radiation a single time. And the lungs, the skeletons, and the livers recede at the highest alpha particle dose. Tumors of the lung, skeleton, and liver occurred beginning with 3 years after the exposure. Bone tumors were found in 93 dogs, were the most common cause of death. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death. And liver tumors found in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 dogs, and occurred later than the tumors in the bones and lungs. So bone, lung, and liver tumors. But according to Matthew Wald, plutonium is relatively harmless. Thanks to the scumbags at the Breakthrough Institute. He said the bottom line, though, is that spent nuclear fuel is already securely and safely managed. It's not. You can't manage it. You can't contain it. It's still splitting the atoms into the environment. That's why there's no containment around it, because if it builds up, you can't get near the building. I got an idea, Matthew. Why don't you just lie non-stop like you've done for the last, probably his whole life? UK sent a nuclear warning as new $20 billion site facing risk from increased flooding, and it could be delayed by up to 10 years. Oh, and this picture doesn't do it justice. It's surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. That's the new plant right alongside the old plant, surrounded by farms. Because why not? How are you going to know that you ate food that was incredibly contaminated? I don't know what to say. It's not just the reactors, it's also the high-level spent fuel points. Pools, asshole, pools. Nuclear energy is obviously the way to go if you want emission-free nuclear Australia. I never get tired of that. 10 mind-blowing Japanese vending machines in 2022. Japanese unique vending machines. You can get popcorn and umbrellas, a surgical mask, and fish broth. Man, never seen that one coming. Oh, and underwear, because this is Japan. This is where it gets weird. The vending machines selling underwear will, of course, be on the list, of course. People often think the vending machines in Tokyo sell underwear are used. But this isn't true anymore. They used to be in the back alleys. No, they used to be up front and center 10 or 15 years ago. The law is strict now, and there's no longer allowed. Some shops around here were selling used underwear. Children, girls, they used to give girls hundreds of underwear and say, got to put it on, wear it for 1 minute, take it off, and they make money, right? Put it in this plastic bag. And they would sell them in vending machines all over Japan, because it's a big trending thing, right? Little children's panties in vending machines. That's quite the culture. Yeah, my dad used to run the vending machines and then they put him out of business. Why? What did he do? Well, it was pretty harmless. He was selling little children's panties that were used in vending machines. It's a strange culture, man. Energy Department ahead of spent nuclear fuel on leave. We covered that last night. I'm still confused by this story. Sam Britton. He's a non-binary person, whatever the frig that actually is. He was ahead of the used fuel. He's obviously, and he stole $2,300, I think, luggage. Around $2,300 for a piece of luggage after getting off the airplanes. Is nuclear power suitable for Ethiopia? Why not use geothermal? Perfect. United Nations adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. United Nations is the military-industrial complex. It's 195 militaries. Its little lapdog is NATO with 30 militaries. Capitalism, yeah. Spent nuclear panties, James. Nice one. Albert, you must have heard me talk about this before. It's better when you got a headline to work with. I used to really stick it to him years ago, right? She said, honey, I found a new apartment, and it's got panty vending machines out front, the used ones. He's like, okay, sweetie, let's get that. Governor wants to open 2 nuclear plants by 2035 in Freeland, which is, don't quote me, which is Amsterdam? I can't remember. It's Netherlands, right, Dana. Energy Minister thinks the construction of nuclear plants can be completed around 2035. You're dreaming, man. You're dreaming, buddy. Who's going to build them, first off? The cabinet set of 5 billion euros aside for nuclear energy in the climate fund. I almost threw up when I seen that. Generating nuclear energy releases no CO2, but a shocking amount of radioactive isotopes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week into the environment. No CO2. It's 35% or 35 times the CO, rather, that renewables. I showed you that earlier at the beginning of the show. These are the same lies recycled and regurgitated over and over with some new kicks to it, right? But you've seen it worldwide, symmetrically using the same exact narratives and deceit and dishonest and propaganda. You can thank the World Nuclear Association for that one. Nuclear buildup and despicable, always despicable, International Atomic Energy Non-Agency. Nuclear buildup sickened his community and caught up with him. This was the Navajo community, poisoned, and is finally catching up to people. Yeah, it's really something what they've done to the Navajo communities. This guy, his father had one of the few cars in the community. He was constantly had to take people to medical appointments. He's got a lump on his throat now himself. Now, what they done to the Navajo Nation, that was horrific. When they even had tailing ponds that were built flimsy and broke and poisoned their drinking water supply permanently and didn't tell the people. And so all the people, the kids, the animals and everything else, it was horrific. But it's just that endless emissions because they never cleaned up anything. They never cleaned up a single thing in the Navajo Nations. Not a single thing. And Navajo is not the real name of those natives, by the way. Rolls-Royce in talks with Enos, which is the largest chemical manufacturer in Scotland. I covered this last night too on nuclear technology. So they're going to put a small modular reactor that doesn't exist, but they're going to sign a memorandum of understanding, of course, because it might exist. And meanwhile, they can't use anything only nuclear. Got to wait for the small modular reactors to be developed and get working before they can switch. So we'll get there. When the nuclear scientist says we can. Meet the nuclear professionals. He used to work for the Navy, like Rod Adams. Then he went to nuclear and then became a scumbag for the rest of his life. The nuclear Navy. One of his great talents is recruiting the right scumbags to solve a problem. Oh, we can make it disappear. Very good. Company decommissioning Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station may dump the water without permits. They've been doing it forever. The fuel pools are always boiling off 120,000 litres each day into the communities. You put paper suits in vending machines. Used paper suits in vending machines. TEPCO burns 7,000 of them a day, folks. Of course, that's a lie. They reuse them on the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. Yeah, it's well, you gotta kind of make fun of it, right? If you don't make fun of it, you're gonna pull your hair out like me. Holtec, the company decommissioning the Pilgrim Power Station, decommissioning. Chris Singh, right, which is Holtec. How many times we encountered him constantly? It is an absolute demon when it comes to slipping nuclear waste into your local landfills and dumps. Wants to dump the radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay. And it's not illegal. They'll just say, well, it meets all the standards, tough luck. The fuel pool is hideous amount of radiation into it. And we covered a story last year where there was something happened. They had a spill from the fuel pool. And they had put it in a bucket and they were carrying it with a forklift or whatever it was, and some spilled out. And so they had to dig up all the sidewalk that they were going along, pavement that they were going along, and put that in a nuclear waste site too. There's 120,000 litres evaporated in your communities from each fuel pool each day. There's about 1,000 of them worldwide. Each litre is trillions of atoms because the fuel rods are still splitting the atoms. It's monstrous, to say the least. It's an absolute emergency. It's absolutely unprecedented emergency to stop this genocide machine, omnicide machine. The company believes it's legally allowed to dump the water. They're right. It is legal. They do that. All nuclear plants do that. They actually all have large pipes running under the ocean for about a mile offshore, and that's exactly what they do with with a lot of the waste is they'll pour water into it, and then they'll flow it out into the ocean. They don't have to report it to anybody, and they usually don't. But there was some blowback started in the spring about Pilgrim's decommissioning and Singh's whole tech. And Singh's the janitor, the manager, the secretary, the secretary governor. EPA signaled amending the permits may be the smoothest road ahead, so they can just dump it. When asked if there would be no discharges prior to the resolution of the permit issue, he said, "I can't say it." No, because they are going to just release it. It's probably already gone. They just don't want to come out and say it. That's the norm or the routine. Inside the tech that could speed up nuclear fusion to harness limitless energy. So why not take some of these scientists and figure out how to drill down and tap into that limitless energy? Why not do something like that? Because then you don't need fusion. You don't need fission. Let's check the poll, maybe. Here, poll 1, poll 2, poll 3, poll 4. We got, should it be a crime to claim that deadly nuclear fallout is the same as flying on an airplane or a banana? Really? 5 people said no? How the hell did that ever happen? We got 52 votes, which is 100% of the sane people said, yes, it should be a crime. And 5 degenerate pro-nuclear scumbags says no. Well, that's outrageous. That's what I mean. The industry can't tell the truth. Nobody's taught them how to tell the truth, see? They don't even know what the truth is. They told so many lies, they probably believe the lies themselves. Does anybody doubt that? Let's get her done. That's only nuclear, Dana. Why are you bothering with fusion when you haven't tried geothermal? Why not drill a hole down to the ground and solve it, harnessing the energy for millions of years? Blackhawks are going to the nuclear option, putting... we should have a poll on that. Should sports be allowed to use the word nuclear? Here's some nuclear for you. Fighter jets were scrambled as Russian Chinese nuclear-capable bombers allegedly entered the air defense zone of South Korea. They deny it, by the way. So South Korea sent up their own airplanes, he said. Our military dispatched Air Force fighter jets. You're going to do jack shit. Well, it's probably in response to South Korea and Americans carrying out, because they're right on Russia's border, right? It's probably because the Americans and South Korea were carrying out so provocative flights, claiming it was to deter North Korea, which has been imprisoned for 70 years, never attacked anybody in 70 years, and has land, sea, and air embargoes for 70 years after United Nations burnt down every community and every city in the entire country with napalm and carried out crimes against humanity as a police action. Yeah, capable, carrying nuclear devices. I thought they called them nuclear bombs. South Korea really think that Russia and China was messing with them. ICANN launches new fund for rapid actions. So ICANN is trying to raise money so they can get out there and be shit disturbers, bless their hearts. But they should be trying to ban nuclear power plants, because then you can't have nuclear weapons. After 12 years, there's no more nuclear weapons because you don't have tritium anymore, right? Just saying. The second annual bus campaign for nuclear power. This is Bangladesh. The Pilgrim Nuclear Power Disease Factory. Let's be clean about nuclear. Let's be clear about nuclear, Dana. I know, I was just trying to play off it. The government, Bangladesh, yeah, that's a government, all right, launched a second annual nuclear bus program featuring a week-long nuclear power awareness raising campaign conducted. They're going to hand out propaganda along the way, right? By officials from the country's first nuclear power project, the first nuclear disease factory. These are brutal disease factories. Once they change the fuel and put fuel in the pool, it's all over for your country, right? And representatives from the Information Center on Disease Factories, aka Nuclear Energy, started their idiot bus tour from the capital city on Wednesday to organize over 13 roadside public events. They should do that here in Canada. Come down where I'm to. I want some of your flyers. You won't come back. I'll make your lives a living hell. You ever do that around here? This is so pathetic. It's just, look at the people flocking there. Here, take some of my pamphlets and go home and read them to your children. Social economic benefits. Young demonic sadistic demons will closely interact with people and brief them on the use of disease factories. Eco-friendly electricity. Oh, I can't read any more of that. That's pretty heavy propaganda right there, baby. And it meets all international safety requirements. There is no safety requirements. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging into the environment 24 hours a day. Hinkley Point faces 11-year risk, extra 11-year delay. Nothing surprises me anymore. U.S. must strengthen its nuclear forces to deter growing nuclear threats. There's a Manchurian candidate if you've ever seen one, buddy, right there. She doesn't even know what the word human is. She probably is. There's a switch that won't let her say it. She's a senior policy analyst for the nuclear deterrent and missile defense at the Despicable Heritage Fund. That's some scary stuff right there. Even when they smile, they don't seem to look human, do they? Like, she has to fake the smile, but you can tell. Like, a child would have run away from her the minute they seen her. She got an amazing education, and she's using it for the worst possible thing imaginable, to promote the disease industry, the mass genocide machine. And consistently funded by Congress. Gimme. Small modular reactors in the dot-com era for nuclear. Dot-com era? You're talking about something 30 years ago, by the way. And the scary part about this is Nuclear Engineering International, which is actually a nuclear lobbying group. It's a nuclear lobbying organization. Climate. Right, the very first word. Look at that. Should I take you through it? You're not going to hate me if I take you through it, is it? Reappraisal of nuclear power with small modular reactors. Well, like, I got some bad news for you. You're the engineering on top of that, and you don't know they don't exist and not likely to? And you can't yell at anybody because you won't put their names on the story, right? Bringing nuclear power to Montana more expensive than originally forecast. Remember, Montana had a ban on nuclear for 40-something years. A politician changed the ban without the referendum. Well, it wasn't a total ban. The ban was if you wanted nuclear, you would have to have a public referendum on more nuclear in Montana. And there was a referendum, and that became law. And then the guy who done that, he just retired last month. Lots of kickbacks from the nuclear industry. How long before he starts working for the nuclear industry? And new scale. Again, they're talking about something that don't exist. Man, this is the scariest thing imaginable, particularly like this last year, where each day there's just this incredible, absurd amount of politicians and government agencies and communities signing on, even memorandums of understanding not to look at anything else, for something that don't exist and has no hope of existing. And like the Rolls-Royce in UK, small modular reactors are not small, they're massive. They're insidiously large. Oh, crap. Okay, let's finish it out, I suppose. Russia says it'll focus on building nuclear arms infrastructure, and all the media was out there screeching that out. I'm going to show you somebody in a military uniform. Of course, that's what they're going to say. What are you quoting them for? Push for nuclear energy to face vibrant discussion. In the Philippines, vibrant discussion. Right, this nuclear power plant, they built it and it was finished in 86, and that's when Chernobyl happened, so they decided to scuttle it, because that was the moral and ethical thing to do, right? The Senate majority bloc is still undecided. The administration pushed to construct nuclear plants. And where's it to? How long would it take us to get a return on the investment? Well, they're talking about small modular reactors. Small modular reactors. So you get your investment 60 years or something, maybe. Why won't you use a geothermal, like a normal, which was never mentioned at the conference of parties, I bet you in the last 26 years, certainly not the last 2 years. Could prove an affordable option and manageable in sizes and scale. Yeah? Why don't you use unicorns running on conveyor belts with a generator? Because that will happen quicker than the small modular reactors. All you gotta do is go swim in a fuel pool for a couple of days without coming out of it, and the unicorn will show up magically in front of you. Austria loses EU court case against Hungarian nuclear disease factory as a neighbor. The European General Council, which had just ruled that nuclear was green, renewable, which is absurd. It was 516 votes to 500. So 500 people voted that it had renewable attributes, which was absurd. It's the biggest polluter in human history. And Austria is historically one of the EU's most fervent anti-nuclear countries, one of the EU's most pro-human, pro-species countries, what you should be saying. One of the most morally driven countries is what you should be calling it. You can't label everybody who's honest as anti-anything. And Austria is currently suing the disgusting, fake European, non-elected Commission over its green label, the taxonomy fable. Net zero needs more nuclear. The president of nuclear. Why are you letting him write articles for in your media? Yes. He, like, hang on. Canada got to build more. This is Canadian, so I apologize. Wait for it, though. So Canadian banks gave him $970 million towards development of small modular reactors. There's zero possibility that they can develop for that kind of money. That's nothing. Nuclear is undergoing a bit of a renaissance, he claimed. This is an absurd misrepresentation. And this is a simulator for the small modular reactors that don't even exist. At the CANDU nuclear control room, the CANDU reactors are hemorrhaging radiation like tritium into the environment at an absurd, unsustainable, a catastrophic amount. We're going to do a whole show on that, maybe Sunday. Renewables like wind and solar are intermittent, right? Yeah. That's because you scuttled the storage for decades. There's around 20 solutions. Did they mention batteries, Dana? Who knows? Hang on. Where's the French fable to? I can't remember. I must have skipped past it or something. Small modular reactors. I thought it was right there. How did I miss it? Hang on. Let me try again. That's the last story. I guess I didn't click on it. He claimed France 70% of his electricity comes from nuclear. This is absurd. Why wouldn't you use geothermal is the biggest question. And if you look up geothermal replaces gas and oil plants, you're going to get a massive amount of propaganda. No matter how you word it, you're going to see the same propaganda show up. It's really something. But if you go read this story here, you can skip out the misery and have all the documentation right at your fingertips. We got a poll. Everybody got a poll. And here's our poll. Should it be a crime? Should it be a crime? Yeah, and there's so many facets to that lie. To claim deadly nuclear fallout is the same as flying on an airplane or sleeping next to somebody or eating a banana or walking in sunshine or getting on an airplane and climbing a mountain and 15 minutes on a kayak. We've heard them all. Peanut butter. Which is why they're dumping it out in the ocean, because it's just like, it's harmless, right, Dana? Sadly, no. Horrifically, horrifyingly, not so. I'm going to end that poll. We're going to end that poll. So remember, 20 million particles of iodine per liter, 220 million atoms from an Ottawa study per liter. They're both Canadian studies. These are catastrophic numbers. The fallout model is only based on 16 days when it stops. And so the industry is absolutely, unbelievably out of control. So you had an overwhelming Can't make bombs with geothermal. You got me there, man. I got no response. Good night, everybody. Don Vincent, Albert, James Lucid, Dana Nasana, thanks for moderating, Dana. Hope it all went well. You had an earthquake today, that's right. In Fukushima Prefecture. There was only found one report on it when I looked this morning. I'll have to check again tonight to see if anything else showed up. Vast Thinker, Albert, Richard. Good night, everybody. Provoke. You guys were pretty witty last night. You're kicking ass again tonight. I know Stephen Young was out there last night. I forgot to shout him out. Because I don't get all the comments on the interior, right? It's usually when I watch the video, I check the video after 12 hours, and then I'll see the comments that I missed, catch up. Because they disappear for 12 hours, right? And I only get whatever Google archives in the operating system. Wow, we got 20 shows in for November. Which is, it doesn't sound like a lot, I'm sure, but it's like in context of how many stories times 20, it's a lot of stories. We cover an absurd amount of documentation each show. John Curtis, just a quick shout out. Just not so quick. Timothy. Yeah. Angel's Place. Sure Colette is out there somewhere tonight. And Stephen C.G. White. We got 100 donation from Michael Schill last night. Thank you, Michael. Oh, Stephen Young is there. Look at that. What part of those lies do I not believe? Peaceware. I think I got everybody. Sandra Wolf Churchill. We're almost down through the comments because I scroll up to whatever I got. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the new system. Wait till I get the kinks out of it. So by Sunday I'll be provoked. By Sunday I'll be in second gear. That's for sure. I'm going to transfer everything. It's going to take probably 2 days because my other computer keeps freaking going to sleep or dying. And when it goes to sleep, it takes about a minute, and then it'll finally go to sleep, and then you can start it up. And it's scary how much noise it makes. So we're past that. That's amazing. I'm super happy. Because that's the only thing that was threatening to shut down the show, right? And we're past that now. Did we get everybody? Looks like we got everybody. Excellent, man. Oh. And Robotussin pulled it off again tonight. Way to go, Robotus and Buckley's became immune to it a couple of years ago, I think. Robert Blob. That's everybody, is it? If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. I appreciate it. I never got jack shit yesterday or the day before. In fact, they've been really censoring my videos the last week or so. I've been kind of on a bit of a crusade for that whole period. It's just coincidence, I'm sure. I mean, 201 views. That was a fantastic video. 167, and that was a great video. 210 views. That was a fantastic video. That one, again, hasn't moved. Look. 8 days, it's been stuck on 192. It's pretty hard for somebody to resist clicking on a picture with a bunch of girls in it. No way, not a single person. Looks like I'm censored is what I'm seeing. Hardcore censorship. You can't blame them. That's the only way they can beat me. It's not like they can beat me in a conversation or something. Right? They can't beat me in a conversation. Yeah, hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Last night of the week. And, what else was I wanting to throw out there? Nothing, I guess. How long have we been going? Because I don't have my normal clock here. Oh, shit. 2 hours and 50 minutes. It's 12:15. I guess I better shut it all down. Let you folks get back to your normal lives. You superheroes that support me. Bless your hearts. Every one of you that are trying to get educated and make the world a better place. You're doing the right thing. You got the moral high ground. See everybody tomorrow night. We'll see you tomorrow night. Hugs for you and your loved ones. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on the other side. For the last show of the week is Thursday night tomorrow. Well, tonight, because this is Thursday now. Take care, folks.